If you've been scrolling through endless pages of handheld 3D scanners, watching YouTube After Effects, and still can't tell whether any of them will actually fit into your workflow, you're not alone. The fear of dropping a few $100s on a gadget that looks impressive on paper but ends up gathering dust is real, especially when the specs sound like they belong on a sci-fi set. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. In this video, I'm going to break down the Creality CRScan Raptor Pro the way you'd expect from a real-world test, the kind of everyday scenarios that matter, the hidden compromises you won't see in a glossy spec sheet, and exactly who should consider pulling the trigger and who should walk away. First off, let's talk about the type of work the scanner is built for. Creality markets the Raptor Pro as a full-size, multi-mode device that can handle anything from a tiny figurine to a 4-meter sculpture, all while delivering 0.02mm accuracy and full-color data at 60 frames per second. That's a bold claim, and it lines up with the kind of projects you see in professional reverse engineering labs or high-end hobbyist studios. The key question is whether those numbers translate into tangible benefits when you're scanning a bike frame in a garage, a broken part for a homemade drone, or an artifact for a museum catalog. I started by testing the scanner on 3 very different objects: a small, glossy resin model, a matte-finished wooden chair, and an outdoor metal bike frame. The first thing that struck me was the dual-laser setup: a blue laser for precision geometry and a near-infrared (NIR) laser that helps the system see texture and color even on darker surfaces. For the resin model, the blue laser captured edges with razor-thin definition, and the NIR component correctly recorded the glossy finish without the usual washed-out effect you often see with cheaper scanners. The software automatically merged the 2 data streams, giving me a clean, watertight mesh that was ready to export in under a minute. That speed is where the high-speed 60 frames per second promise actually matters. I was able to walk around the object, keep the scanner moving, and still end up with a full model. In a real-world shop, that translates to less time wrestling with the device and more time iterating on designs. The wooden chair presented a different challenge: a matte surface that tends to scatter light, making it harder for any optical scanner to lock onto consistent points. Here the Raptor Pro's stable tracking feature came into play. Creality software uses a combination of laser patterns and visual markers to keep the scan aligned even when the surface is uneven. I did notice a few occasional hiccups when the scanner passed over a particularly grainy section. The point cloud briefly lost density, but the software filled in the gaps in post-processing. It wasn't a deal-breaker, but it's something to keep in mind if you're dealing with very porous or heavily textured materials. For most furniture restoration projects or prototype fittings, the occasional need for a second pass is acceptable, especially when compared to the alternative of manually measuring each dimension. The outdoor bike frame was the true test of the wireless and outdoor-ready claim. I powered the unit with its internal battery, stepped outside, and scanned the bike from head tube to rear dropout. The NIR laser handled the ambient sunlight surprisingly well, and the device didn't lose connection or lag while I moved around. The resulting mesh captured the bike's geometry and even recorded the anodized color accurately, a useful feature if you ever need to reproduce a custom paint job. The only drawback I encountered was that the battery life, while decent for a half day of scanning, dropped noticeably after about 2 hours of continuous use. If you're planning a full-day field job, you'll want a spare battery or a portable power bank on hand. Now, let's talk about the practical strengths that make the scanner stand out. The first is versatility. Because the Raptor Pro can handle objects from 5mm up to 4mm, you don't need to purchase separate equipment for small prototypes and large installations. That alone can save a small studio a few $1,000s. Second, the powder-free scanning capability is a subtle but important advantage. Some competing scanners require a coating of talc or spray to get a reliable read on glossy or reflective surfaces. With Creality's dual-laser approach, you avoid that extra step, which means less prep time and less mess, a real convenience when you're dealing with multiple parts or delicate items. Another practical win is the software integration. Creality's bundled application is ready out of the box for both Windows and macOS, and it supports popular formats like OBJ, STL, and PLY without needing third-party plugins. The workflow feels seamless. You start the scan, watch the live point cloud fill, hit save, and the mesh is automatically cleaned, decimated, and ready for printing or CAD import. For users who aren't comfortable diving into complex post-processing pipelines, that level of automation can be a game changer. On the flip side, there are a few weaknesses that you should weigh before committing. The first is